It was a shootout in Atlanta on Thursday Night Football, and Kirk Cousins came up clutch. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with the help of our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every Friday, by Locked On NFL expert, the mastermind, Ross Jackson. On today's show, it is Doug Peterson's last stand in Jacksonville. We got some revenge games in week 5, but first, Kirk Cousins comes up clutch for the Falcons. Before we dive in, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Make sure that you tune in later for the afternoon version of Locked On NFL and step into the barbershop with Tony Wiggins. Today's episode is a FanDuel Friday, so of course it is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ross, what an incredible Thursday night football game, 36-30. The Falcons win. Kirk Cousins was absolutely clutch in this game. The Falcons came back from down 3 points late in the game. Multiple times, the Buccaneers had a chance to put it away, but they could not stop Kirko Bangs, who delivers in Atlanta.
He was absolutely outstanding, man. Like this game's all about Kirk Cousins, right? Like Kirk Cousins is one of those guys whose name has been besmirched and all this other stuff. He ends up, leaving. He got traded from Washington or sent away from Washington, ends up in Minnesota for a little while, leaves Minnesota. And then the Atlanta Falcons, who everybody said was going to hurt after the days of Matt Ryan, they end up with this guy that's able to come in and orchestrate and run the offense and maximize the talent around him. What a phenomenal performance by Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons offense, which I do think got a little bit of help, but we'll dive into that in a little bit because there was some stuff that Tampa typically does they didn't do, but all that did was open up the gates for Kirk Cousins, who came in, as you said, absolutely clutch, especially at overtime drive, absolutely outstanding.
Quite honestly, it was probably the best quarterback performance that we've seen throughout the entire NFL season so far.
I'd have to agree
My guy,
that.
Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons, broke it down.
Kirktober starts with a bang with a thrilling Falcons overtime win over the Bucs. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. We wondered if the calendar turning from September to October would mean success for Kirk Cousins and the Falcons offense, as it often has throughout his career, and it absolutely delivered in a thrilling 36-30 overtime win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to kick off week 5 on Thursday Night Football. Cousins threw for 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, had a late game interception, but the Falcons defense, after a rough first half, stepped up, got a stop, and Cousins led the team down the field to set up a 52-yard game-tying field goal from Younghoe Koo to send it into overtime, where Kadero Hodge broke loose on the opening drive for a 45-yard walk-off touchdown. For more coverage of this big NFC South win, follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ross, like you were saying, this is all about Kirk Cousins to me. They threw the ball. Kirk Cousins threw the football 58 times. The Falcons only ran the ball for 73 yards on the ground and still put up 550 total yards. Like, they couldn't get the run game going against this Buccaneers front, but yet Kirk Cousins just took the ball in his hands, connected with Drake London 12 times for 150 yards, got Kyle Pitts going. Darnell Mooney looked fantastic. Like, this is all about Kirk Cousins orchestrating this, and after the first month of the season where he didn't look that great, he really looks back on track now.
Yeah, something about Kirktober, right? Let's steal from Aaron Freeman there. He's got a 98 passer rating throughout his career in October. He plays extremely well during this month and just gets better and better as the season goes on. In fact, actually, Kirk Cousins' best passer rating month comes in January, a pretty good month to be at your absolute best, if you ask me. I think the thing that you also saw from Kirk Cousins in this one, Tyler, comes from the maturity the calmness, the composure in some of the bad situations that Atlanta faced, if we're being honest. A lot of big penalties when they got into opposing territory, right? As they neared the red zone area, having to walk back to first and 20s, third and 14s in some occasions. Then you had sort of the mental side of the game as well. Darnell Mooney looked really good, but also dropped a couple of critical passes, but Kirk Cousins continued to go back to him. They continued to go to the air. You can't do that without a quarterback that's a solid leader like Kirk Cousins is.
Yeah, it has to be somebody that you trust, and clearly they trust Kirk Cousins. I do want to give some credit to offensive coordinator Zach Robinson from the Atlanta Falcons. They had a clear plan of attack. If you watched all the exit motion that they were using, they were clearly trying to open up the middle of the field. It was very apparent out of the gate. They were, running motion from the inside to the outside, getting Drake London matched up on the linebackers and middle field defenders, and with Antoine Winfield out. That was absolutely how you should attack this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. So a great game plan by Zach Robinson. But on the other side of it, Tampa Bay, you got to feel like you completely choked this one. At the end of the day, they had multiple chances to close the door on the Falcons. The Bucky Irving fumble at the end of the game. If they just keep that ball and they get down in field goal range, you give yourself another field goal and another chance to make it a 6-point lead instead of a 3-point lead. And then Younghoe Koo can't hit that game-tying field goal at the end of regulation. Also, they get the holding penalty when they're close to field goal range that makes them move back. They had that ball less than 2 minutes on the Falcons side of the field, and they lose 14 yards in those 3 plays to lose their field goal range and a chance to make it 6. So while the Falcons took advantage, the only way that the Falcons were able to do this is because the Buccaneers really missed out on opportunities that they had to close the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Atlanta didn't get they blitzed on, I believe it was 60% of their pass rushing pressure opportunities in the first half. 0 pressures throughout that first half on Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. You had the missed field goal by Younghoe Koo. Later on, you get the blocked field goal as well. Lots of opportunities for Tampa to be able to extend a greater lead, but they were never able to really pull away. And then the thing that I referenced earlier about allowing Kirk Cousins to be comfortable in this game came from the fact that Todd Bowles' defense, which is one of the most blitz-happy defenses in the NFL, played a ton of zone and didn't send a lot of pressure. And I think that was one of the things that worked to their disadvantage as well, because they allowed Kirk Cousins to be comfortable and take advantage of those options in the passing game pretty well. And those options in the passing game doing a very good job of finding those holes in those zones as well. It just felt like a little bit of an uncharacteristic defensive game by Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers that Kirk Cousins was able to take full advantage of.
You can't let those veteran quarterbacks get into a rhythm, because once they get into a rhythm, they see it, they start picking you apart. And I'm going to look back at this, Ross. I did pick the Atlanta Falcons to win the NFC South before the season, but beating the New Orleans Saints and getting some of those lucky bounces that they got last week on turnovers, and then following that up with this clutch comeback win, I mean, to me, this is back-to-back weeks where the Falcons really pulled one out, and these are the type of division games that matter later in the season. But with that being said, it is revenge time in the NFL. We got Stefon Diggs against the Bills, Sam Darnold against the Jets. Some of our best bets for Week 5 in the NFL coming on this FanDuel Friday edition of Locked On NFL. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun and the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. That's probably why they have over 10 million members and billions, with a B, billions of dollars awarded in winnings. Look, Prize Picks is simple. You just look at the Prize Picks projections and you say whether the players are going to do more or less. So, for example, if you bet on tonight, you would be looking at Kirk Cousins, 250 passing yards, or Drake London, 3.5 catches, or Bijan Robinson, 60.5 yards. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players and say whether they're going to do more or less than the projections. And if you hit, you have a chance to win up to 100 times your money. It's not going to be funner than that. Make sure that you download the app Prize Picks today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks, Run your game. All right, Ross, we are going to continue a FanDuel Friday. It's time to look at some of our best bets here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Do want to remind you guys to tune into the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL. Step into the barbershop with Tony Wiggins. He's going to be breaking down all this Week 5 NFL action as well. But like I said, it's revenge time in the NFL, and we got the Buffalo Bills against the Houston Texans in one of the best games of the week. Stefon Diggs getting his first chance at revenge against the team that traded him away. Ross, I got to tell you, in this one, you look at the line, Texans are getting 1.5 points right now, or the Bills are getting 1.5. My apologies there, Texans at home. But I don't know about the line. I don't know about the over-under at 51.5 on FanDuel, but I love Stefon Diggs anytime touchdown plus 160. It is a revenge game, and you know how head coaches do this stuff. They're going to want to get Stefon Diggs involved early. They're going to want to get him in the end zone. I think a Stefon Diggs touchdown is absolutely coming in this one.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree with you here. This is one of the games that a guy like Stefon Diggs absolutely lives for. He's got an attitude. He's a wide receiver one. He's a petty dude. This is 100% the type of game that he lives for. Oh, you couldn't make things work with me. You thought you would be fine without me. Let me show you what I got. In fact, I would almost take 2 or more touchdowns when it comes to Stefon Diggs in a matchup like this, just because I know that dude's attitude. I can't wait to see him in this matchup, but I'm with you. I think an anytime touchdown for Stefon Diggs is a really good one. And I'll be honest with you, I like the Houston Texans in this game big time at home. They get the 3 points going, that would typically go their way because they're at home. So you could really even look at, Buffalo as an even further favored team in this matchup. But I really like Houston in this matchup. And I think not only is Stefon Diggs going to play hard because of the situation and the revenge factor, I think the team around him is going to play just as hard to represent.
Absolutely. And I think the trade, ultimately, looking at it as things stand right now, looks like a win-win. The people in Buffalo seem to be happy with the way things are going. Obviously, Houston is happy with the addition. And my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills talked about that in the Crossover Thursday episode.
Stefon Diggs is a great football player. Have the Bills missed him? I mean, the reality is they kind of transitioned away from Stefon Diggs last year over the last 12 games. And I am not trying to slight Stefon Diggs, but over the last 12 games last year, Khalil Shakir outproduced Stefon Diggs on 60 less targets. Like that, it wasn't working. They needed a switch. And so I think it's good for Stefon Diggs the remainder of his career to be elsewhere. And I think the Bills and their everybody eats mentality on offense has unlocked another level of play for Josh Allen, where he's got, the best EPA he's had in his career so far, the first 4 games of this season without Stefon Diggs. And look, I'm not going to sit here and talk bad about Stefon Diggs. I think he's a great football player, but I think both parties are where they want to be. And I wish Stefon Diggs nothing but great success moving forward and tons of great memories for the player that he was in Buffalo, and so fun to have that type of production on your team on a weekly basis.
Joe is too nice. Joe's just too nice. We need a little more petty in the crossover there. But yeah, I get it. I'll tell you, Ross, I'm going to oppose you in this one. I think that Buffalo wins this game. I think Buffalo's a better team. I think they're going to be angry after getting beat down by Baltimore. The Texans have kind of skated by in the first couple of weeks. They haven't played great football. There's been penalties. There's been mistakes. So I think that Buffalo actually comes in there and wins that game. But very interesting matchup. But we at least agree on the Stefon Diggs anytime touchdown coming. 100%. Absolutely. But speaking of revenge, we got another revenge game. And shout out to our everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. If you aren't an everydayer, well, you need to be one, because if you are an everydayer, then I think that Sam Darnold is getting revenge on the New York Jets this weekend. Ross, I said it on Thursday's show, the Vikings minus 2.5 against the Jets in London, minus 110 on FanDuel. I'm hammering that. I think the Vikings are a way better football team. I think Brian Flores is going to just hammer a banged up Aaron Rodgers. And I got to say that Aaron Rodgers being on the injury report, traveling overseas. Like, I think it's going to make some of these ailments for a 40-year-old man worse. So again, it's a guarantee for me. I'm going Joe Namath and taking the Vikings.
I love it. I love it. I'm actually with you on this one. I got to go to London and watch the Vikings and Saints play a few years ago. And that London crowd loves them some Vikings. I think that goes a long way as well. I don't know that it's necessarily going to feel like a home game for them, but I think that there's maybe it's the skull chant or something like that, right? It's it's that whole piece
roots
of the European, exactly, European history that they just get behind. They're like, Jets, whatever. I'm here for the Vikings. But look, here's what I want to say real quick. I was a doubter in Sam Darnold. And I gotta say, I was wrong. I was 100% wrong in terms of what we've seen so far this season. I'm loving what we're seeing from Sam Darnold. I think he keeps it going over across the pond.
100%. And I think Luke Braun, the brain, really enjoys seeing Aaron Rodgers and the Sam Darnold dynamic. And he talked about that with John B on the Crossover Thursday for Locked On Vikings, Locked On Jets.
I can't tell you he's playing poorly. I think he's playing okay. Now, he's not playing at like Aaron Rodgers level. I think, if you wanted him to be like the MVP level Aaron Rodgers, he was in Green Bay. He's not that. If you wanted him to be totally washed up, he's not that. He's 40 years old. He's coming off a serious injury. His mobility is greatly decreased. In fact, I think if you want to talk about the areas of decline for Aaron Rodgers, number one is that he just doesn't move as well as he used to. I shouldn't say he can't move well anymore, because you can see against the Denver Broncos, he still made some plays, but there were moments where, he evades pressure and he can't like outrun a defensive lineman, so he just kind of checks it down. And I remember saying 7 years ago, he's breaking it. He's breaking the pocket. He's throwing a strike 20 yards down the field. He's still as smart as he's ever been. He still makes great pre-snap adjustments at the line of scrimmage. He'll make great post-snap adjustments based on what he sees. The arm is. I think his arms are probably like 90% of what it used to be. There's a throw here or there where he misses it, and you say, he used to be able to hit that one.
That is not a good position to be in against Brian Flores' defense.
Nope, that's exactly what I was thinking.
That is literally not what you want. So, again, I'm hammering the Vikings -2.5 in this game. You want the money line. You want the point spread. I don't care. The Vikings are winning this. And Ross, I'll tell you, I was wrong about the Vikings as well. I talked about that yesterday with Michelle Majuk, that, they're one of those teams that I wasn't right about. In a week before that, I called them contenders. Sam Darnold has been good, and he'll remain good, I guess. He hasn't been great, if we're honest. But the defense with Flores, the play calling from Kevin O'Connell, they're going to get TJ Hawkinson back. Jordan Addison came back with a bang last week. Aaron Jones is an improvement in the run game than Alexander Madison or Ty Chandler or anybody else that they've had in the last few years. I just think the team and the offensive line, the team is so good around Sam Darnold that it makes them contenders in the NFC.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to look at it. You need a guy that's going to be able to come in and run the system. Sam Darnold, after he's no longer seeing ghost, shows up, runs the system. And hey, in this one, we also get a marquee headline matchup. Justin Jefferson, Sauce Gardner. Sign me up for that all day. Good wide receiver cornerback battles are what made me fall in love with the NFL in the first place. I can't wait to watch this one, even though it's 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah, Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts with the Jets, but this weekend, the Jets might see the ghost of Sam Darnold. With that being said, though, we got some great matchups to talk about as well. Doug Peterson's last stand in Jacksonville. We got an iconic matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. As a reminder, make sure that you tune in to Locked On NFL in the afternoon. Step into the barbershop with Tony Wiggins. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans. Yep, I'm talking to you, NFL fans. You can start the second quarter of the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you could go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets on FanDuel. We're giving you out a bunch of great bets on today's episode. And now when you join FanDuel, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So throw $5 on the Minnesota Vikings money line. You're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make sure that you visit America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com. All right, Ross, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. What an excellent Thursday night football game where Kirk Cousins came up absolutely clutch. We talked about some revenge games with Stefon Diggs and Sam Darnold. Now I want to take a look at some other great games this weekend. The Doug Peterson game in Jacksonville, his last stand. I think Doug Peterson might be fired by the time that we talk next week, Ross. I think that's absolutely coming this week. But good Sunday night football game with two of the most iconic brands in the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Are they the most iconic pairing in the NFL, though? We'll talk about that. But I got to talk about this Doug Peterson situation one more time here. And I know my boy Tony Wiggins is sneering at that with his Jacksonville Jaguars sitting at 0-4. But the reality is the Jags are at home this weekend against the Indianapolis Colts. And Ross, I like a couple of things in this game. I like a bunch of bets in this game, if I'm honest with you. The Indianapolis Colts are getting 2.5 points. I love that, especially if Joe Flacco plays in this game. And I think he might, and there might be someone else who agrees with me on that. But if you're the Colts going into Jacksonville, knowing that, you got a great chance here to send the Jags to 0-5 as a division mate, are you playing Joe Flacco or are you playing Anthony Richardson?
I think I got to go with the guy that's a little bit more the sure thing right now. And for me, that has to be Joe Flacco. I think that right now, Anthony Richardson is kind of in his chaotic era. And I think you want him to work his way out of that before you go with him, right? Like you have a real opportunity here to stamp a big win against an AFC South opponent and potentially send the head coach packing in the process. Go with the guy that's going to be the more sure thing, whose floor you can really, really lean on. And I think that is Joe Flacco. Even though I think that mobility in a quarterback raises a floor, there's just a lot of chaotic activity when it comes to A-Rich right now. Let him get that settled down, roll with Joe Flacco, who also, by the way, looked great with the Cleveland Browns last year. So we're not talking about a fluke.
Well, I think the mobility factor is absolutely great point. And speaking of that, my guy Jake Arthur from Locked On Colts used that as a way to say that he agrees with you.
But your honest opinion, if he is not himself, and they have to play a quarterback from the pocket, wouldn't you rather that be Joe Flacco than Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I'm kind of the thinking right now that if Anthony can't be fully Anthony, like if all he's really going to be able to do is pass in this one, I think I would just use Joe Flacco. And there's Jacksonville's pass defense is not doing well. They're not getting after the quarterback at any ferocious rate. So you're probably better just putting Joe out there in this one and letting Anthony get a little bit better. And you have an AFC South game again next week against the Titans. So, if there's really no threat of him running,
right,
then I probably wouldn't do it.
And the Titans have struggled with mobile quarterbacks. So sit Anthony Richardson for a week. Let him get used to, get healthy with the hip flexor. Make sure that Joe Flacco can go out there. And you're right, because not only do you win a division game, but you send a division opponent into disarray, which eliminates the competition for the rest of the season. Now, I will tell you, other than Colts plus 2.5, I love the over in this game, 46.5 points. These are two bad defenses. I think we're going to see a ton of points. And Jacksonville at some point is going to have to get ultra aggressive to try to keep their season afloat in this one. But because of that, I also love a Trevor Lawrence interception. I just love a Trevor Lawrence interception in this game. I think that's absolutely coming. The Colts, surprisingly, despite having a lackluster secondary, in my opinion, have been able to force some turnovers. So in this one, Colts, Jags, I think the Colts win this game. I love them plus 2.5 on the road. Do you think that Doug Peterson is fired by the next time we talk, Ross?
I think if they lose this game, yeah, we're talking about Doug Peterson as the first head coach sent packing, and you know we love some chaos early on in the NFL season, and I think that's one that we'd be looking at. They've been a conversation so far as that they went from being the team that was almost favored, if not favored, to win the AFC South to now being in conversation for being the worst team in the NFL, along with the Giants, the Panthers, some other teams that are completely abysmal. And so I think you have to look at sort of what the expectation was versus what the reality is. And so far, Doug Peterson has produced something that comes in well below expectation.
Ross, I just have to say, when you cover the NFL, a lot of people say, oh, you just hate my team. I do hate Jacksonville. So I don't shy away from that. And Tony Wiggins on Locked On NFL in the afternoon would 100% agree. But with that being said, we got a Sunday night football matchup between two. We go from the Jags, one of the least great brands in the NFL, which my Titans know about that, to one of the best brands in the NFL, in the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But are they the best matchup in the NFL? We heard about that on the Steelers Cowboys crossover Thursday.
Do the Cowboys and Steelers have the best uniform matchup in the NFL? Like, there's something about the Cowboys and Steelers uniforms together that just make this awesome TV and great football.
Look, like every time they meet up, it is like iconic, right? Like it's just like they do clash very well. Like the blue and the white, the black and the gold. It is one of the greatest clashes, like as far as uniforms and styles. And again, branding, like it's just, the Steelers defense has been very good for most of the 4 games. But last week they had a letdown game a bit, allowing 27 points to the Colts, allowed 17 points in the first 3 drives. And that a lot of people were wondering, okay, is this the real Steelers defense or was that the real Steelers defense? The Cowboys offense has been good at the times this year, but has also faltered a bit. And they were able to get over the finish line against the Giants, but obviously 20-15 against the Giants isn't the result that you want there.
All right, there are a couple layers to this, Ross, in my opinion. From a matchup standpoint, watching it on television, I'm sorry, Pittsburgh. I love Pittsburgh. Great. They're a great organization. But 49ers, Cowboys is the most visually appealing matchup historically in the NFL. I consider myself somewhat of an NFL historian. I love the classicness. I love all the classic brands. But the gold and the red with the silver or the the white and the blue, whatever you want to call it with the Cowboys, the silver and the blue, that is just so pure to me, that NFC matchup. And blues and reds, humans like what humans like. We love our blues and reds. You love the orange and all that. So I would go with that personally. But some bets that I like in this one, I'm hammering the under. It's 43.5 points on FanDuel. I think that Pittsburgh's defense is better than they looked against the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Cowboys' offense is not as good as maybe some people imagine it is in their head. So I love the under in this game while also saying, sorry, Pittsburgh. I'm going with San Francisco and Dallas as the most visually classic matchup in the NFL.
Yeah. And I will take any odds that will allow me to be able to take advantage of TJ Watt getting to Dak Prescott. I will take that all day. I'll tell you another uniform matchup that I think is really great. Green Bay Packers, Detroit Lions. That's another one that I absolutely love. Very classic, long lasting, lots of history, but also the color combination. And I'll take you back on a history tour real quick for the worst uniform matchup we've ever seen. I believe it was a debut season of the Color Rush. Buffalo Bills, all red. New York Jets, all green. Colorblind folks couldn't tell the difference between who was playing what. It was an absolute tragedy on Thursday Night Football. I'll never forget that. Really, this looked like a Christmas matchup, but beyond that, some folks couldn't even tell who had the football. So that was easily my worst uniform matchup ever.
Yeah, tough times for our colorblind friends. Shout out to you guys out there. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. Man, I absolutely love football. What a great game on Thursday night. A bunch of great games in week 5. Going to be back with you here on Sunday night or Monday morning, I should say, to break it all down. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, here, as I am every FanDuel Friday with the mastermind, Ross Jackson. Make sure that you guys get subscribed, stay subscribed to the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.